I love the countdown, but didn't actually put it online.
Will we do a sound check? Can I do a sound check?
I'm excited.
6 minutes.
6 minutes?
6 minutes. 6 minutes. Oh, but it would be nice if there's something.
Well, no, we can be quiet and then we'll do a big applause. We'll do it the other way around. Then we do that. So I'll do my first sentence and then you can go mental, okay?
Okay.
So we'll have silence until then because I'm trying to do a real slick opening.
6, 5, 4.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the third and final evening of Wake. I am your host, Leonie, going in a different direction, McDonagh. We have connected with people from all over the world, from Alaska to Canada to Colorado to California to Hawaii to the Netherlands to Switzerland to Australia, from Dundalk to Donaghadee. We have delved into the chaosmos, into the temple of the profane. This is good, isn't it? Yeah. We have delved into the chaosmos and into the temple of the profane. We've been through the death of God and transformance art, from the blissful ballad to the blistering jazz techno beat. I'm telling you, it's taken down on me though. The comments box has been alive with conversation, curiosity and camaraderie. We've survived the big stink and the Eurovision. What will tonight bring? Stay tuned. That's good, isn't it? Like, I have definitely. Here, Barry Taylor, get off your phone and come and say.
Well, I was posting a picture.
Oh, were you? Tell us, give us what happened today. That was actually interesting, wasn't it?
I don't know if it's that interesting, but maybe it is.
You are mic'd, I was going to say.
Yes, under the hair.
Yeah.
So I was wandering around Belfast in the early morning rain, just taking in the sights and just, actually looking for somewhere open to get coffee. I'm walking along, I can't remember exactly where, but there's a sign in the middle of the street, and it's a picture of, it's for a vintage shop. There's a picture on there of a woman kissing a guy in a diving suit.
Yes, I know the one, yeah.
Yeah, you know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. The woman kissing the guy in the diving suit
is
my ex-wife.
Well, what are the chances of that?
She's found me all the way here.
And did you know what? Did you?
No, actually,
you recognised her when you went. Oh look, I
no,
went down with her.
I didn't.
You
actually.
didn't recognise her.
Well, no, because it was a picture from.
Yeah, it's a very vintagey, dated. Like it's like a pop-up.
It's been treated.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So it just happened that I posted a picture.
The one in the big helmet.
Yeah, she's the one in the helmet. That's why I didn't recognise.
Yeah, you have to post this picture again. Yeah.
So actually, she contacted me and said, "That's me. That's an ad that I did for some swimwear thing." How weird is that?
How weird is that?
To meet your former wife in Belfast.
Are you on good terms with your former wife? Yes, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. Life's too short to be mad or mean or angry for long.
Yeah, well, you're entitled to get angry when you've been reason to be angry. But yeah, I suppose get over it.
Indeed.
Tell the audience as well, it's worth mentioning that the Muppets are reunited.
The Muppets are reunited tonight.
Stadler and Waldorf are back.
They're back in the corner. We're ready for the groans.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Boo.
Can they see that, Alan? Can they? Do I need to hold this up to the camera?
We have our very own Muppets. Our very own Muppets.
Well done, Johnny. Shall we welcome to the stool everybody's favourite, Dr. Peter Rollins.
Oh, thank you. Stop it. So I'm going to do just a little bit of an overview of where we've got and what we're looking at tonight. I'm going to try and sum up what we've been doing over the 6 hours that you've had already. Day one, as you know very well, was all about this notion of the death of God. And very briefly, I described this statement as a way of saying that reality itself is divided. There is a chaos in the cosmos of existence. There is an impurity with impurity, a darkness that is within light. And when we try to separate these out, get rid of the darkness and keep the light, we end up creating communities of purity and having communities of impurity that we want to reject and destroy, that we believe are monstrous. And we break the world into these binaries. So I was talking about how the death of God is this realization that we have in various sciences, in evolution, or in biology, it's evolution, the not at oneness of the biological organism that creates life. Or in physics, you've got indeterminacy, the idea that light acts as a wave and a particle. There's a type of not at oneness within physical reality. And I also looked at, in psychoanalysis, the notion of the unconscious is that part of us that derails us and decenters the consciousness. I also then looked at the idea that anxiety then is not something that we have to try to get rid of. And anxiety is not something that we simply have to endure. Anxiety is the truth of this antagonism. When we feel anxious, we don't know what we should do or who we should be. We don't know if we should go out or stay in. We should take that job or not take it. We stay with that person or leave that person. We feel this anxiety of not knowing where we fit in. And that not fitting in, that feeling like you are an outsider, is actually part of the truth of reality itself. Anxiety is the truth of existence. And somehow we actually have to accept it and find a way to even enjoy that undecidability that we experience in our lives. I also touched on the idea that, I don't think I said this directly, but I'm trying to say these things succinctly tonight. I took 6 hours to say them. These are the tweetable parts of it. Is that the difference between humanism and Christianity is that in humanism, people realize that God does not exist. In Christianity, God realizes that God does not exist, right? And I think I've told some of you this, but one of my very few spiritual experiences was when I was in my early 20s, and I had a dream. And in this dream, I was down a place called the Wandsworth Road, and the whole place went white. And God appeared and told me that God did not exist. And that has been something that I've been trying to work with right through from when I was probably in my early 20s to now when I'm 48, trying to work through the significance of that notion. Because what you have in Christianity at this key moment is when Christ cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? So God experiences the loss of God, and then God dies. Now, the reason why that's significant is because, as we've talked about, in humanism, when God dies, when you no longer believe that God will make you whole and complete, Nietzsche says that we find other things that will make us whole and complete. Commodity satisfaction, psychedelic enlightenment, sexual revolution, whatever it is, something that takes the place, some new thing that's going to make everything perfect, some new utopia, some new wholeness and completeness, certainty and satisfaction. And to free ourselves from this, what we need to do is somehow experience reality itself collapsing. Now, this brings us to the second night, the wake of God. I talked about how whenever someone dies, the death is a type of trauma. And we can't speak it. It's a too muchness, something that we can't put into words, that we can't describe. And a wake is an attempt to put that death into words, to put it into song, to tell stories, to remember the person who has died, to put this into a symbolic form. And in doing that, we remember the one who has died. And then there is life after death, because they live within our words and within our work. By mourning and putting that person into the symbolic, we somehow carry them on into the future. This is life after death. And what I talked about is how we need music and comedy and art and storytelling that helps us encounter our brokenness and our anxieties and our fears rather than repress them. And the point of parotheology is to create a liturgy that does that. And we experience, in a sense, what I talked about is that we think that the liturgy is God. We think that what's going on in the music and in the storytelling reflects reality. And what we hear in that music and what we hear in that storytelling is actually an affirmation of the antagonism of existence, that we are pure and impure, light and dark. That's the profane temple. And so that brings us over to this evening, which is about resurrection. What resurrection is that life after death. It's that point when you're able to speak the trauma of this rupture within reality. You're able to put it into words. You're able to describe it and articulate it. And in doing that, something of what you've lost returns. So as I mentioned, you have a death of somebody. You have a wake where you articulate that death. You remember that person. And then you have the afterlife where they are alive within your work and your words. In the same way, when God dies and we experience the loss of truth and beauty and justice and some ultimate answer to everything, as we're able to take that into ourselves, we discover that beauty, justice, and truth is not some object to grasp, but rather is in the work of love, is in the community of people living together, looking out for each other. God is not an object that you love, but the name of a depth dimension you encounter in the act of love itself. We become the body of God in the world. And so tonight, what I want to do is look at that resurrection, what it means to be a community where we embrace this type of brokenness that I've been talking about. We affirm it, and where we become the meaning and the beauty and truth in living together and being together.
Hi friends, I hope you're very well. It's very nice to be with you. I wish we were all together in a pub somewhere in Belfast or somewhere else, anywhere really. I'm pre-recording this. I can't be up at the pub. I've got terrible asthma. I've got about a third of the capacity of an ordinary person of my own age of lung capacity, so I need to be pretty careful about COVID this year. So anyway, in future years we can all be together. I'm sure that over the last few days already you've been having an extraordinary time with Pete and with Gladys and with Barry and with the music and with each other and the conversations and the thought. So I'm really glad to be part of this zoo of questions that we're all part of. I'll share some poems that I hope are in conversation with some of the work that Pete's been doing and the rest of the folks have been doing too, when it comes to the question of what does it mean to pay attention to nothing. Emily Dickinson is a big, I don't know what she is actually. I was going to say she's a big influence on me, but that's probably not true. I don't know what she is. I circle around her universe and wonder what it would be like to put a little toe inside the universe that she inhabited and the universe that inhabited her. In one of her poems she says, "Nothing is the force that renovates the world. Nothing is the force that renovates the world." What an extraordinary line. So here's a few poems that kind of play around with that idea. This first one's called Make Believe. And on the first day, God made something up. Then everything came along. Seconds, sex, and beasts, and breaths, and rabies, hunger, healing, lust and lust's rejections, swarming things that swarm inside the dirt, girth and grind and grit and shit and all shit functions, rings inside the tree trunk and branches broken by the snow, pigs' hearts and stars, mystery, suspense and stingrays, insects, blood and interests and death, eventually us. with all our viruses, laments and curiosities, all our songs and made-up stories, and our songs about the stories we've forgotten, and all that we've forgotten. And to hold it all together, God made time, and those rhyming seasons that display decay. I don't have any children, so therefore that qualifies me to make vast sweeping statements about parenthood and what my perfect children would be like were I to have these hypothetical children. But I have always thought that if I was to have children, that I would want them brought up Catholic, not because I would demand a devotion, I hope, but I think a narrative background in something is a really helpful starting point in the art of argument when it comes to questioning what you think. Knowing something helps you to ask questions about nothing, and that, I think, is a helpful thing. So here, in a certain sense, is a poem about what that's been like for me. The waters of religion at times felt like a place of great belonging, but these days I suppose I still populate the waters of religion, not because I find it a place of great belonging, but because I find that I see things there that I perhaps wouldn't have seen elsewhere. There's a poem called "Let the Waters Swarm with a Swarm of Living Beings," continuing on the Genesis idea. I've been swimming around here for a while now, and while I've never touched the ocean floor, I've tried. You notice things out here, the way the wind makes waves chop at odd angles, the way the water feels warmer at the top, the way the moon makes music when you're half dead with cold, the ways of frozen bones, the way the morning never feels the same. Once a seal bumped me, came right up to me like a sea puppy, and I swear it smiled. I was floating happy after that. I said the ocean was my home. Then the storm came. Then the waves. Then the lightning spiked the surface. Thunder clapped. Hungry beasts swam round me. I saw seagulls eyeing me for scraps. I suppose these days the idea of nothing is a deeply appealing idea for me. I do know, though, that changes in a time of grief. I went through a lot of grief last year, still living with it, really. Sometimes nothing is phenomenally unsatisfactory and you want something. And that, I think, perhaps, maybe, can be the experience of question, the possibility of language. And all within that, I think, listening to the imagination and hearing what the presence of the absence evokes in yourself. Certainly for me, that's given me a great sense of comfort. And so Emily Dickinson's line is that, nothing is the force that renovates the world. I wonder sometimes what I'd think if I changed that to God is the nothing that renovates the world. So I'll continue with some more poems along that idea. This is a poem called Ex Nihilo, meaning, coming from Latin, meaning from nothing. It's a phrase that's used to speak about the creation of something from the nothing. I suppose I'm interested in the creation of the nothing from nothing. So, Ex Nihilo. Believe me, I'm the last man to believe me. I believed in danger from the first day I could think. I learned to speak by screaming, some of it aloud, and my first word in 2 languages was remember. Nobody taught me how to promise, but I promised, and it wrecked me. Remembering kept me hungry for decades, and when I stood up against it, I ran, I flew, I panicked at its threats. I grew more frightened than I'd ever been. In the beginning was a word I had heard. Then I heard another word that made me listen, made me stand. Who said it? Not a man, that's for sure. Men were too busy teaching me their sure and frightened ways of purity. Who whispered it? Who said it? Who worked that word of wonder into me? Who freed me? Who believed me? So I hope that there can be some kind of connection between us, even though we're separated and even though there's all kinds of barriers in between us, somehow that there can be a connection between us as we think about what the experience of the nothing was like, what describing nothing is like, what quality of nothing is nothing, and what quality of nothing is the circling around its edges. I tend to think that Jesus of Nazareth was on a long journey really to coming to the belief that maybe he believed God didn't exist. Maybe my God, why have you abandoned me? Was his recognition that there would be no second coming in great glory. And facing up to that, and I find great comfort in that, recognizing that actually the political and social and power-based communications he had throughout his life, the communications that got him exercised, I'm still on that got him executed, that all of those things actually were an end in themselves. Those questions he posed of power were interesting enough to ask, even if there was no great reward at the end. And strangely, that going into nothing might have meant that other people too, hopefully, could be inspired to live in a way where they too would begin to question power. So here I will finish with a poem called Wild. It takes the idea of Jesus of Nazareth in the desert, a story I've been fascinated by since I was a child of 9 and begged my parents for a Bible for Christmas, and they got me a Bible with pictures, and I looked throughout it to see if I could find a picture of the devil, and there was one, and the devil had sky blue skin and bright red eyes and a long snaky tail and the feet and legs of a goat. And I suppose I found that fascinating as a boy, and then I've thought about the devil for a lot as growing up, and realizing that I don't believe in the devil was a powerful moment in my very early 20s. And not only that I don't believe in it, but I don't need to believe in it, and that there are far more interesting things to think about than this imagination of personified evil, like the evil in me that might mean I need mercy. So here's this poem, Wild. Because you too struggled, you went into the wild with nothing to shield you from the light. You learned to shade your eyes from the sun. You sweated in your sleep in the heat of the day. You made up stories to waste time and to keep the fear away. It didn't work. You wrestled with a devil more subtle than the one you'd read about. He didn't lurk in the corner of your cave or scream at you with a night blue mouth. He didn't roast you or launch himself out at you, all bat wings and hooves. He was always with you, but you didn't see that till the end. You'd been worrying about food and flight and fancy and how to be who you were. You'd been worrying about prayer and the way a man should care for his country when his country's a plaything for a despot. You'd been worrying about thirst and endings. You feared death, not fear, but both made you feel like a failure. One brutal, the other goes on forever, just like you, and the devil I see through you.
Pádraig Ó Tuama with a gentleness unmatched. Take it away, lads. Have a good time.
I was going to get you a beer. I was going to get myself a beer.
I mean, just leave me here
Well, this,
on my own.
Maybe we did this
With
yesterday, the kind of inadvertent,
Oh, yeah.
Peter becomes the
Barkeep.
barman.
yeah,
Yeah.
Give me one of those
And I'll have one as well.
non-descriptive cans.
And we've got our...
is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
You like it?
I'll have one of those. And does anyone else need a drink?
Anyone want a
Anyone
beer?
at home? Adam, you all good?
Okay.
All right, take it away, Adam and Peter.
Well, people have been waiting for this. I think for
Yeah.
this is the main event.
Oh, well.
for
It's a
8
climax
years.
of sorts,
Yes,
I guess.
yeah,
you'd say.
anticlimax of sorts. Yeah, we've been working together on this for 8 years, and this has never happened, has it? Have we ever talked?
No, we
Ever,
haven't,
even
no.
behind the scenes? No, yeah.
Um,
Well, I kind of wanted to talk to you, and you want to talk to me. But did you want to start off with any questions or thoughts?
Where to start?
Well, okay.
You start.
Okay. Well, so the whole point of tonight
Yeah.
was more the what does this look like in practice?
Yes.
So I sent him a text today, and you told me, you're like,
Oh, I should read it.
Oh, yeah,
Where is
read
it?
it.
I'm going to
That's
read it
right.
out. It's like
he was like, I
I
wasn't sure
thought
if
it
you
was
were
kind
just
of
taking
passive
the piss.
aggressive. Like, it says, "I likely ask you lots of questions and use you as an object lesson in what I'm describing in my work."
Yeah,
Okay.
and he's like,
I was like, it was a bit. I kind of.
like,
I'll
"Are you
use
taking
you
the
as an
piss?"
object.
object lesson.
Okay,
As in, like,
but-
you know, I don't say nice things about you very often to your face or behind your back, but I think that your work is a bit of an expression of what we're talking about. Because you went from confessional religion, complete rejection of it, and then this embodied work that I think captures something of, you know, you
Yeah, well, I would say sort of, I guess I've thought about it a little bit more in recent years in terms of like what it, why I do what I do. So when you get older, you do that. So like when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you're just running around like, let's try this, you know what I mean? And then once you get to, maybe people do it earlier than that, but I've sort of found the last few years like kind of going, well, what's important to me? Why do I do what I do? But I think in terms of, I think I was always motivated by the same things.
Yeah.
I just don't think I had really kind of given form to it, you know?
Because, like, you could say, maybe this is too succinct a way of saying it, but there might not be any meaning of life, but there's meaning in life. And I think, like, in your early days, you're looking for the meaning of life, and you're kind of inspired by that question. You give that up, but you find meaning in life, in the work that you do. Because I should say, like, Adam does many things, but he does a lot of work in the city of Belfast in terms of supporting artists and musicians, doing gigs. You've been very central to kind of keeping the city.
I mean, I
as
played a
authentic as
role.
possible.
I think what I've realized in the last few years is that what I'm obsessed with is the idea of, funny enough, replacing church, and communion is important, whether or not it's religious. You know, whether it's a theist communion. You know what I mean? So, and in particular, I guess during COVID, that's become really clear that people miss communion with other people. I mean, that's what's been great about like hanging out in a pub with you and a few others for the weekend. It's like that we haven't been able to do that, and that's why, in a sense, like Wake will never be just an online event as well. You know, it's been okay, and I think some of the feedback online has been that it's been good. It's not as good as it would be if we were here, but it's been good to have it. There's no question of this ever becoming just an online thing, because that's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what you're in. I don't think we're not interested in that,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
So, you know,
It might be a tiny element, you know, that we integrate,
absolutely.
but no, yeah.
But it's like a pop. If you've been to Wake, you'll know certainly in the last couple of years that I'll always introduce it by saying it's a pop-up community. You know, so look out for each other, like as if you're part of the same community, and behave like we're family almost for you know 4 or 5 days. So even I'm really interested in just like finding ways to make people connect, and you know using art to do that, I guess.
And you used the term communion. It's funny, so I make a distinction between community and communion. A community I define as a group that's gathered together around something they share in common, either a shared enemy that they hate or a shared set of beliefs that they hold sacred. So communities always gather around what they hold in common. A communion is a group that's gathered around a loss. So communion is literally a meal around the death of God. God has died. Everyone gathers around this loss to remember. AA is a type of communion gathered together around a shared brokenness. Even Burning Man is a type of communion. So the whole point of my work is not community, but communion. And even what people might recognize here is like this room. This is, you can't. One of the reasons why you couldn't do this where I am in America is like half the people in this room have got no interest in my work. More than half of them, and like there's people who.
One.
In fact, I'm struggling to see anybody who is interested.
That's pretty generous. Yeah.
Like
Well, yeah.
some of the people have had paths in the church. Some have had no paths in church. Some have had positive experiences of religion. Some have had very negative experiences of religion. Some people might here believe that in a God of some sort of ground of being. Some people here don't. And it's all of that mix. That's a communion. Like we're not gathered around some shared belief or shared kind of anything like that. But hopefully what I try to do is we're joined together through a shared antagonism of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I think an artistic commune is.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Can you say yes in a way that sounds more like no?
No, I mean,
Give it a try.
I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to think of how to add to
Yes.
that.
Well, tell us about the vault very briefly, because we've taken people to the vault whenever we've been doing Wake Live.
Well, Ursula's a member, and Phil actually is a member, and
And
Johnny.
and
Sorry,
Leonie?
yeah, keep
You're taking people
No.
from
And
the
Johnny.
vault.
No, Leonie turned me down. Oh no,
She's too good
she
for it.
came in and then
Yeah,
said,
Leonie's
"No,
too
I
good
can't,
for it."
I can't be here anymore.
I was there.
These people are such dickheads. I'm out."
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, you've got more class.
I
more
actually
class.
sought her out and asked her to join, and she did for a while. But
Yeah.
anyway. She moved
It
on
was the
bigger.
right time, Adam.
Oh,
And you're a bunch of dickheads.
yes.
So what is the vault?
So the vault is like basically, well, I mean, the story goes, I got an email out of the blue one day in 2016 from a guy who owned a building who said, "Do you want to have it for a while?" I was like, "Yeah." So I got a few friends together.
And it was a bank building.
It was a big old
Really nice,
listed
yeah.
bank building. I made the mistake of showing it to Phil first, and he said, "Nah, I don't know." And then I
He is called hard. Was that hard crowd Phil?
tough crowd Phil.
Tough crowd Phil.
I made a mistake of doing it. And I genuinely like
Never get his advice on
no,
anything.
just like, what do you think of that? That's a bit shit. Anyway, so then I showed it to about another 20 people who lost their shit over it and was like, "This is brilliant." So 26 of us took over this building. I think one of my favorite things about that moment was that we had this. I'd worked out that there's a thing called, I don't know what it's like in the States, but there's a thing here called rates, and rates is like it's like a tax that you pay to the government based on the value of the property that you inhabit.
Tell
right?
us more.
I know, sorry, but the point being that we couldn't afford the rate. The point is we couldn't.
This is fascinating
Shut
television.
up. We couldn't afford the rates,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So basically, what it was going to be like. That would have ruled it out.
Yeah.
So, but if you're a charity, you don't pay rates. But we had to kind of risk that you could move in for 10 months and then get told, "Oh, you owe us 10 months worth of rates," basically, right? So we all agreed that we were going to risk this together and that we were all just going to disband the charity and run away and hide if we ever got the bill.
Yeah.
And we sort of collectively agreed to take that risk. And then we didn't. It was okay, and we went. But then we lost that building, and now we've got a new building, and there's 4 times as many people. There's about 115 people in the new building. We just got a 5-year lease. We've been there about 2.5 years, so we've just got a 5-year lease. It's got a brilliant dance studio. It's got a big theatre, rehearsal space, an allotment, a tool library, right in the most challenging part of the city, possibly that you could have it as well. So. Yeah, like I'm kind of fascinated by community. I'm fascinated by one of the things that's most interesting for me about running the vault is realizing that people are the biggest problem. And like Marxism is all great in theory, and then people come in and be dicks, and you're like, "Oh God, I've got to deal with this." So but it's hard. But that's really hard work. Just kind of. Because, as you say, people are traumatized.
Yeah,
It's not their dicks, but you know what I mean. Like they make life difficult, you know, and
Trying to soften the blow now.
yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully none of them are watching, apart from the ones that are in the room.
Yeah. It's more than half
I didn't
the room.
mean any of them were dicks, by the way, clearly. But it's really hard. I think I'm still a chairperson of the charity. And I kind of basically have worked out that the best way to do it is just to learn to really love eating shit. you have to basically just eat shit all the time and apologize and say, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that was my fault, even if it wasn't, you know, and just be kind of quite humble and not that's kind of...
It's turned into a little bit of a therapy session
but
for
yeah,
Adam
well,
here.
that is what you wanted.
That is what I wanted.
But yeah.
And you were mentioning as well the connection then between what you were doing, because people don't know this, but Adam ran a thing called the Lab. It's
Yes,
so fab.
that's right, yeah.
It's the
It's
Lab.
so fab.
And that was kind of the precursor to Icon. I was your co-host.
That's right,
And
yeah.
we would do these kind of very creative events. You would choose like a topic like food or something random
food
like
was
that.
good. Like we did the one on time was fun as well.
Was that the one where the video then went into some crazy like...
No, that was the
porn
Fig
scene?
one. That was the
is that
Fig
right?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was because it was back in the days of VHS, and I had like recorded some. I don't know I can't remember whatever it was, but I had like I never even watched it, but like years and years ago, I had recorded Last Tango in Paris when it was on, and the video ended, and then it just came in at the really crucial moment, shall we say, of Last Tango in Paris, like just broadcasting this. That was pretty horrendous.
Yeah, but that was what you were doing there kind of that set the scene for a lot of my work. And so that's why it's interesting that because you did turn very radically away from a confessional religion. Like when did that happen, or did...
Well, it kind of happened very slowly for me. Like, actually, I think I've always felt it's because I'm a stubborn bastard. Like the idea that I would go, oh, I was wrong, and now I think something completely the opposite of what I used to believe. So it was a very slow and gentle process for me. I mean, I would say it happened over about 4 or 5 years, where I kind of, and then there was a point. Oh yeah, you know the story as well. Pardon me. That whenever I was younger, I had prophesized that I was going to die at 32.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm 49 now, so they're way out. If I didn't stop smoking,
we had bets. I lost a lot of money.
I know.
I was very
but,
disappointed.
I think it's funny. I've talked about my partner with this in terms of like that was the year for me where I went right. I'm actually just going to reject religion for the crack, right? I'm going to just, and it's funny, my wife has said that she would be the opposite. She would have, her response to like impending death would have been to cling closer to religion, but mine was like, well, I just reject outright the whole
before
concept.
your coming death, you rejected it, or after it didn't happen?
Because if I reject the whole concept, then that's not a prophecy. Do you know what I mean? It's like
so you did this before your death.
So I think when I was 31, I thought about it a lot. It was like quite at the forefront of my mind. Yeah. But then about the time that I turned 32, I chose to just basically put it away from my mind, and I didn't think about it at all most of that year, you know.
Yeah.
And that was when I was like, I'm now an atheist. I'm like going to call myself that and own that, you know, because I'm sort of pretty much there, but like that I'm going to close that book, that chapter, if you like, and like there's no point in. I mean, it was incentivized to me in terms of like, you know, survival in a sense, but it was like, so it didn't feel like a Damascus Road. It didn't feel like a death of God.
Yeah, right.
Which is kind of the point. I guess for me, it just felt like a gradual.
And this was my critique of it, by the way. This is why I think it didn't happen at that time.
Yeah,
I think.
So when do you think it happened? Has it happened?
42, no,
Yeah.
52. It's well, so what happens sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, there, you know, humanism is that you realize God does not exist. Christianity is when God realizes God does not exist. And I think the atheism was. When you rejected it, but I think it's actually been, you know, very gradually again, probably, and it reflects your work with the Vault that that death of God experience might have come later, being a later thing. I don't know. I mean, for me, the death of God experience is when you're freed from all of the trappings of religion in a secular form as well. You're no longer pursuing some sort of commodity or thing or fame or money that's going to make you happy, that you kind of let all of that go. When did you, maybe you never even had that, but that's kind of...
I suppose possibly whenever I lost my job in council and I kind of realised I didn't need it. I mean, that's probably, when I said earlier, I think that's definitely amongst the most traumatic things that ever happened to me. I'm not getting into it, but it was like sudden and really traumatic. Yeah. I had been working on a project for many years, which is why I'd stayed in the council, you know, because I really enjoyed that project. And I kind of then let go of that project very, very quickly because I was like, well, there's no way I can go back to council after that. So it's over, but I can do something else instead. And I think since then I've been fairly kind of zen about things coming and going. You'll try stuff and sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. And but yeah, I mean,
see, this is like I
feel like I actually had been on that journey before that atheist moment though as well. I think I had already let go of all those expectations before. I think God was almost the last thing to go for me because it just felt quite. And I remember like shortly afterwards, like hearing something on the news and going, "Oh yeah, end times," and then going, "Oh fuck yeah, I don't believe in that anymore." Do you know what I mean? It's like it's so triggered. Oh yeah, Jerusalem. It's like something. Oh yeah, it's weird how conditioned you are in a sense.
And that's very true. That you can have that experience within a confessional church, and with still believing in God, you can be freed from this libidinal investment, this frenetic investment. It's just the word God is often seen as the ultimate wholeness and completeness, but that God can die and you can still happen to just believe in God because you're conditioned that way, but it is devastating. That's the point. It's the moment when something happens that
well, I kind of wanted to ask you, actually. So I think there's two things I wanted to ask you. The first was like, I'm kind of interested in terms of how much being Northern Irish, and in particular growing up in Belfast, has informed a lot of what you're thinking. Because I think when you talk about trauma, like I think as a society, we have a collective, even the young people today, they have inherited trauma. It's not like that as a country, that doesn't go away. And now you're out living in LA or whatever, but that's still obviously, I guess, front and center in your work.
Yeah. Who was it, Phil, who said that identity politics was basically weaponized in Northern Ireland? Lion Schreiber. Is that, yeah. That's
me also.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That interesting. Yeah, I grew up, and we grew up in a culture where identity was weaponized, and where purity cultures, as I've been talking about, purity cultures reigned. We're pure on this side, you on that side of the wall are impure, and so we grew up. Obviously, as Europe got basically Northern Ireland's got the most peace walls in all of
the world.
The world, so walls that are dividing us, and. So I guess actually from when I started Icon, there was a desire to challenge that dimension of Northern Ireland, that breaking into these binaries of the monstrous and the pure.
You've been doing a good job. I mean, it's really, the rest of the world hasn't gone binary at all.
No.
It's like, I literally feel like Northern Ireland has infected the rest of the world. It's mad.
That's crazy. This is why the work is more important than ever, really, is that because whenever you can't handle conflict, war is just around the corner. Conflict is where I can be fighting with you. When I can't fight with you, I want to kill you. So when conflict disappears, war is always around the corner. And I talked about primal agony on the first night, and primal agony being that experience of pure horror of something that's the other's going to kill you. There's monsters under the bed, or these people here are the absolute enemy, and that's evidence of splitting the world into pure and impure. And this is, if we don't address this in some way, I think we're going in a terrible direction. Yeah.
Cool. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, I find it weird that I've never heard you talk about this actually, and that's not weird, and it's not a critical way. I just think when I think about the most traumatic thing that's happened to me in my life, it was when a mutual friend of ours got killed in an accident, and he was somebody that I completely associated with you. Actually, it was like
we were converted at the same time.
You were converted at the same time. I thought of you and him as a unit nearly, and I remember really clearly. Like I called you PK about 3 or 4 times shortly after he died, and I felt really embarrassed and more. Like I remember seeing you after he died and just not knowing what to say. Because we were young, like it was 20, 21. And just never experienced any kind of loss or anything like that. So I just didn't know how to talk to people, who were in and around that, you know. And he was a close friend of mine, but he was a much closer friend of yours, you know.
I remember, were you in the group that came round to my house that night to tell me there was a big...
No, I was away. We were up north.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of us up north, and we got a call from Joe that he died, and I got the call, and I had to tell everybody, and it just like never experienced anything like. I don't think I've experienced anything like it since. You know, just in terms of the shock. I've known people who've died, but like for somebody to basically, that was just a horrible accident, and he was just dead. You know, and that was grim. You know. But I mean, does that? I've never. I suppose in a way, like I just find, for somebody who talks about all the things you've talked about, I find it surprising that I've never heard you talk about that, because that must have been really impactful for you.
Yeah, I mean, so this guy PK, I told a story. Didn't I tell a story about coming out of Strand Cinema?
You told that story many. Oh, you no opportunity to talk about rapping for Jesus will ever go past without you taking it. But
someday we're going to find a tape. I swear there is a tape somewhere in the world. But he was there, and just very briefly a story. He that night had this profound experience.
100%.
And it included exorcism on the street.
Yeah.
And it included, it was quite a powerful experience. There was about 12 of us, and everybody else went home, and it was just me and him. We stayed to the end. And I remember just being there, just talking. I was probably talking to you. I was like, It was very, but then my friend beside me was like screaming and rolling around, doing all of that. And I was like, just kind of talking. And
in English, not in tongues?
Not in tongues, not yet. You know the crazy thing? I'll tell you, this is true. This is crazy. And I think I can maybe explain this. I'm not telling you some mystical story or anything, but that he had this conversion moment.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then the next week, I'm sitting in my house on Saturday night. Do you know this story?
No, but maybe.
Well, so I'm sitting at 7 o'clock at night, and I just break down into tears. Absolutely, for no reason. I'm going to this party, break down into tears. And then I just leave the house and run to CFC, run to the church. And I go round the doors, and I find a door that's open, and I go in, and I go downstairs into the basement.
Into the basement, wow.
There's a little prayer meeting.
No
and
way.
They're praying for him.
No way.
With PK.
Wow.
You know? And I didn't know. I was all, and I was just one of the things that came up. It wasn't like I'm making it a bit more dramatic.
Actually, Pete, now you've explained this, I think I do believe in God now.
Yes, you know, there was just a lot of unconscious stuff going on, okay? But fascinating, weird things happen. That's all I agree with it. But so that was it, and that was kind of like, and then it got even weirder from there. But so me and PK were incredibly tight. We went through this weird experience together, and yes, then he was tragically killed. And the crazy thing is, he was so into this. Like he was like the Keith Green. He was we all looked up to him. I looked up to him. And and then he was gone. And that was a very significant moment. And do you know something? I don't know if I should say this, because
there's people watching. Just
I know. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. Yeah, absolutely fine. But there was always a worry that he got himself into that situation because of his belief.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know. I mean,
he fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
You know, and there is always a.
I don't think so. I don't think. Okay. I mean, from what I know, I spent, the guy who was with him at the time, I spent quite a lot of time with him shortly after. He was like very badly affected by the whole thing. And by all intents and purposes, I think he just lost his footing. You know, they weren't doing anything stupid, you know. But I mean, that's interesting that you put that on that, you know. That's
it, because that's maybe the way I should say it, is that was not a reality, but that was how I read it, because all of us had such undivided belief. I mean, I did stuff.
No, absolutely.
I was in City Hall praying for this guy with an eye that was missing, thinking the eye would come back, and I was so sure it was going to happen. I was like, I met him, but like that's good. So there was such a certainty, a psychotic certainty almost, and that so I did go, like, we were doing things that were kind of crazy,
and like stuff like Nick would like get up on the bus and like in the public on the bus and say, I just felt like God told me to tell everyone that
He loves you.
Just like, and he had like, Nick had like missionary on his like passport as his job and
That's
stuff.
right.
Like it was mad.
Nick's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not there. He's not in that place anymore.
No.
I do think there's to bring it round as well a little bit.
Is this interesting, or is this us? Oh, it's okay because we're kind of. It's very just okay.
There's this really weird, like, when my kids hear that I was religious when I was growing up, they're just like, you know. And I basically try to explain like, well, it was 19 days in Belfast. There was fuck all else to do. Do you know what I mean? It was like literally, we didn't even have a McDonald's. You know what I mean? So you know, that was all there was.
Yeah.
Was religion.
Yeah.
So it was, and I think, you know, I always tell this story about how. Like I always tell a story, like I said, if I'm you, but I always tell the story about how, you know, during the Troubles, I would tell people, you'd meet people on holiday or whatever, and go, oh, it's not that bad. It's not like it is on the news, you know. And then it ends, and you go, oh my God, that was fucking awful.
Yeah.
Like, so for those of you who maybe don't know the full history, there was a ceasefire, and then the ceasefire broke down. And there was a couple of bombs. And I remember that point in time where the ceasefire broke down, where I was like going, oh, I'm actually scared now. I was literally walking around, Troubles era Belfast, just like...
Oh, yeah, you just didn't care if there was a bomb went off. Nobody really
yeah, you'd be like,
mind.
bomb scare? Fuck, what? Like, yeah, you know, I have to do, you know, and... Yeah, so like, the most impactful one was me. There was an advert for... They basically used to have adverts to try and tell you to stop doing the Troubles, right? Do you remember this? You know, it started off with, you could tell we were nearing the end of the Troubles because there used to be one which was phone the confidential hotline on the big bastards that are like being paramilitaries and stuff. And then the adverts changed, right? And the adverts were like, oh, listen, it's been a tough old time. Like you know, everyone suffered. You know, and they had those. Remember Cat in the Cradle? There was this advert with Cat in the Cradle.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
So like about 2 years after the ceasefire, Cat in the Cradle came on the radio as I was driving over the Albert Bridge Road. And I haven't heard the song in ages. I used to hear the song all the time. And I got into this journey in my brain. Oh yeah, I used to hear this all the time because we had the Troubles then. And it was an advert to tell us to stop doing the Troubles. And I used to get like stopped. But at the point where I was driving, you used to basically get stopped by the army every time you would cross the bridge and be asked where you were going. And I'm like, and I don't have to do that anymore. And suddenly then this whole kind of cascade of like trauma effectively happened where I went, oh, that was shit. That was really, really awful. And it didn't really... And it was literally listening to, you know, Cat in the Cradle on Atlantic 252 and my wee Honda Jazz driving over the Albert Bridge Road.
Wondering why you're pissing yourself.
Why am I pissing myself? No, exactly.
It's really weird. Every time I hear that song.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that trauma is present in both our works.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
That is key to my work because if you're teaching students what cancer looks like, you show them an extreme version of it, and they can eventually, as they get better, they can kind of isolate something that's not, you know, that's not extreme or even pre-cancerous.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we lived in a cancerous, toxic purity culture and division. And so it taught me how to see it in less severe forms.
Yeah.
So whenever my kind of wider work, I can go like, no, this is where this goes, you know, because we learned how to see it because we lived
I've just thought of something really profound, Pete.
Okay.
I'm usually the person...
First time, everybody. You're here for this. This is why you're paying the money. I've known him for 25 years. There's never been anything good from this guy.
Well,
go for it.
I was actually taking the piss. It's not that profound.
Okay. All right, okay. Yeah,
it's basically just that I'm usually the person keeping time, and now I have no idea if we're running behind time. Oh, yeah, there we are.
When does that end? Like, well, how long have we got?
That's fine. I can tell what time it is, but I can't look at my timetable and go... What time should we be finishing?
I can tell you, I can be useful here. You have until 9:20 according to this.
Oh, wow.
Jesus. No, is that not the Last Supper included?
Is that not the...
Yeah, the Last
Supper starts at 9:20.
And then we pour it.
Oh,
We're so far ahead of schedule. Oh, nobody wants to listen to us for that.
Might have to do another rendition of Dry Your Eyes, Jesus.
Yeah. I don't think I can win.
A nice song to do.
Yeah. Well, those two things you talk about, one, the troubles, and then two, PK. I kind of think, so with PK, he took his faith so seriously, and it was beginning to crack for him. And
Was it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was interesting knowing him, and,
Right, okay.
and it was cracking because and here's the weird thing. So he studied scholastic philosophy, and he was a couple of years ahead of me, and then I studied scholastic philosophy.
Fuck, I did not know that.
Yeah, so
That's mad.
he was super smart, incredibly smart guy, and went to a good school. I went to a shit school and got 1 GCSE. He went to Sullivan.
Sullivan,
yeah, but super smart, and he started studying philosophy, and he was taking the direction that I ended up taking, because it wasn't that he stopped taking his faith seriously. He was taking it so seriously that he started studying scholastic philosophy, and as you study it, and it's something I've talked about in other places, but the whole point of can I waffle for a second?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
please do.
So my interest is the concept of God. I think I said that the other night. I don't think about does God exist. I think of does the concept of God exist, and the concept of God exists. Right? And then I go, does the concept of God necessarily exist? Which means, would humans necessarily conceptualize God? And I would argue yes, that by definition, there's a point in human history when we have the concept of infinity, necessity, eternity. And so what God is the name for necessity, eternity, infinite. Right? So then you go, so God necessarily exists. Then I kind of say that once you go deeply into this notion of God, it starts to get so intense and so dense that it eventually crumbles into something else. And it crumbles into kind of humanism, and then it crumbles into existentialism. And basically what I would argue is when you keep going deeper and deeper in, eventually, like a neutron star, it becomes so dense, it rips through thought into reality. And this is philosophy, but the idea is that the idea that God is self-divided, which is I've been banging on about all the time. The reason why I bang on about it is that the idea that there is a self-divided concept is where we touch reality. This is where we touch reality because reality is self-divided. And he was going along that journey. Now, he wasn't very far in it, but he was studying the philosophy. He started to get into mysticism. You go from traditional theism to mysticism to humanism to existentialism, and he was into mysticism. And when he died, I think I took on that journey, started studying scholastic philosophy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
there you go.
Mad.
So then your atheism, your kind of rejection. The thing I've been trying to say is that once you go through that experience, eventually you find not the meaning of life, but meaning in life. And you were doing the lab, and now, as I say, you're still working. You still have a vocation. And for me, that is. I would say that that's very parotheological.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the more, yeah, I definitely think.
What did you think of me, by the way, in my work before we worked together? What did you think I was doing?
I mean, there's kind of definitely a lot of it gets put through the lens of banter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for those of you who don't know, a few of us set up a fake Twitter account for Pete called Real Pete Rollins. And we would literally just.
I didn't know who this was, by the way.
Part.
So this fake, this real Peter Rollins appears out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Just designed, dedicated to take the absolute piss out of me.
And the best thing about it was a collective project. So you were like going, how would they know? I mean, you would think it could be Adam, but he wouldn't know who Rob Bell is. Or it could be, Phil, or James, but he wouldn't know this or that. So all this composite kind of knowledge of Johnny was great at knowing all the sort of bullshit around the world of pyrotheology that I just wouldn't have had a clue about.
And then there was one of our friends who just liked flirting with people.
Yeah,
Dave.
Yeah, Dave just basically. And then one night I tried.
You made underwear with real Peter Rollins, little thongs. Yeah, the song, yeah. And
we sell them?
I met her. Halfway across America.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't so one of the real Peter Rollins was flirting with this girl who bought the thong, and then we hung out. She was lovely.
It wasn't Six Smith Sammy, was it?
No, she was great as well. Yeah. But this is Northern Irish Friends for you. It's like literally this was dedicated to trying to undermine me.
It was one of the most
every step of the way.
It was one of the most. Genuinely, it was one of the funniest periods of my life. We had a separate kind of chat going on, and we would just sit there and work out how to.
It was a bit undermining.
Oh yes,
No,
that's true. Yeah,
it
what was
wasn't.
it?
That's true.
It definitely wasn't.
No.
There were times actually whenever you were in complicated conversations.
Do you have a mic, by the way?
Yeah.
I have a mic apparently.
Who gave him a mic? My
When you would
God.
be being attacked very unfairly, and the world of Twitter, it's a pretty awful world at times, and we would be both, providing the ironic commentary at the same time as kind of being on your side. So it was quite a complicated. And actually, this brings me to a question. So, the resurrection side of things. What happens after the death of God and after the wake, which we've been talking about tonight? And the question I was thinking was, what's the relevance of play here? The thing that seems to continue to be happening here is that you can take the same things that you had before, but you do something different with them. Yeah. And you become more playful with them.
Yes.
Would that be a reasonable way to think about it?
Absolutely, and that's so true. Like the thing about the real Peter Rollins, it was playful, it was fun. I knew, I always had thought it was James. James, because James is actually one of the first people to follow me or something like that. But it was this beautiful piss take, and people started to think that I was doing it, and I was like, I wish I was.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh no.
And
by the way, it was.
I think there was one night on International Birds Day. So International Women's Day, we turned into.
I know. Let's cut this.
I can't believe I said that out loud.
I know.
But it was just. I woke Ali up laughing so much. It was like, and then we had. Remember Easter? We killed you and brought you back, and then we had a rapture. We raptured you in the end.
That's right.
And I had a rapture rap. And the call and response. And it was like Gareth Higgins left behind, Rob Bell left behind, and all. Do you remember this?
It was brilliant.
It was so fun.
And the thing about this, which Phil's bringing out, is I talk about this the divided leader, right? The idea, and I talked about Hegel's monarch. So the idea is an absolutely powerful, an absolutely powerless monarch, a monarch who, is above everything and has all this power, but actually their only job is to sign the will of the people. So this weird contradiction. But the idea for Hegel is that once you realize there is no non-castrated other, there is no undivided leader, there is nobody who has the answer, we're all in this together, that's part of the cure. So the idea of having a whole feed, a whole thing, always constantly undermining me and taking the piss out of me. And every time I try to say something profound on
we would
Twitter,
literally mirror it. Yeah.
You'd mirror it by saying something really, really...
Trying to monetize it, you'd say something really profound and then we'd say, more or less the same thing, but then make it like, no time wasters or send your money here or whatever, available, blah, blah, blah.
So it was this constant undermining that was the perfect message. That's why I was very sad when, of course, they had to die.
It was only 4 months.
It's only 4 months.
It was only 4 months. That's the mad thing I think about.
And I remember the day you told me, we went round to Johnny's to play poker. We're sitting at the poker table and you all stood up and said, I am the real Peter Rollins. It was an I am Spartacus moment.
It was totally exactly that, yeah.
And where I realised it wasn't one person, I was like, oh, of course, it was everybody.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful example of this.
I have a question for both of you, if that's okay. So one of the differences between you, when you were using religious language, and I remember being part of Icon years and years and years ago, and one of my difficulties was having begun to abandon that language myself, I would quite often be frustrated that you would continue to use this language. Yeah. And Adam had abandoned this language entirely, as he says, God was dead, as in there was no God. But if you replace the word God with authority, so what was dying or what was being challenged with authority and the places where authority was before, it seems to me that you would have had more quickly a connection, so that you were both skeptical about where you put your authority. So you called that God. Adam would have maybe made that a more political thing, and called it where we tend to put our political. But is that would that be a connection between you? That's what you're really talking about when we talk about the death of God is the death of authority, the death of where we put authority.
That's true, and this is where, like, I hate to say it, but this is probably where you were influential to me. Like the Siren Project.
Yeah.
The Siren Project was
That was the lab.
That was the lab. So the lab was part of this thing called the Siren Project, and the Siren Project was all about questioning authority, and everything you did was this
the media,
anarchic.
the media in particular.
Yeah.
That was the media was the big bad with the Siren Project.
What do you mean by the?
Well, just like, you know, I was very influenced with the idea that, you know, what I learned at degree level in media studies should be on the curriculum first year of, like, because it's the one.
Imagine if you'd done a real degree.
I know. What's yours again? Sorry.
Scholastic philosophy.
Anyway, yeah. So I just kind of think, like, you know, it's that idea of, you know, understanding how to as soon as you start to learn about that shit, you're just going, wow, like, we should absolutely teach our kids how to read the news. I mean, most importantly, like, how to look at who's in charge of the news. Yeah. You don't just accept the news as, like, this, you know, the internet said. I mean, the one thing that's the biggest joke in our house is, like, when somebody says something and it's like, you want to interrogate them, you go, like, well, where'd you learn that? And somebody goes, the internet, and we go, you know, like, it's like, you know, check your sources, you know. So that kind of stuff's super important.
That was in your blood. No, so everything you did was questioning authority.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. That's what I mean.
And that
never just take anything that you're told for granted ever. Yeah. Always just go, well, why?
And that's why you've got in trouble so much by those in authority, you know, because you have, and anybody I know who takes that, you end up getting on the wrong side of authorities, and say, you mentioned losing a job and all of that, and but that's the connection. That's probably the connection between our work. That's the influence of the lab and the Siren Project.
And the interesting thing for me now is getting to the point where, I was saying to somebody earlier, like, we've got to the point with our work where we go, like, when we put a tender in, we're going, like, we're going to be dicks to you, basically, you know, and if you don't want to work with us, that's fine, because we don't want to work with you, you know, but if you're open to this kind of critique, then
I just had this, by the way, I think I can say this because it's not, but I had the same thing. I'm working on this documentary by Tammy Faye.
Oh, yeah.
So we got into negotiations with Vice. And we're talking with Vice, and I have this meeting with them, and I'm sitting there, and there's 4 of them there, and I think they just assumed that we would really want to work with them, and so, and I was just like, I had no deference, like I just didn't care. They hated me, and so we basically, but we walked away from it. What's that? Mutual. It was mutual, but we kind of worked it out. But it was in this interesting thing of going, like, no, I don't care. You know, it's just I don't have that, and that's the spirit of Belfast.
It's authority.
It's authority. It's like it's all authority's divided. You're no better. You know, you've got more money and more influence, but your ideas aren't better, and we don't need you.
Yeah. I think there's absolutely. For people at home who maybe don't know, like, I run a street art tour here. I do a lot of work on street art, and one of the things I talk about on the tour is how Belfast is. It's kind of probably one of the most rebellious places you can be, because you basically have these 2 narratives set up, and if you don't ascribe to them, then you're, you know, our media, our politics, our education, everything goes into this kind of binary green and orange kind of pots. And if you sit outside that, it's very, very hard to find a place in Belfast. And what those people tend to do is they tend to gravitate towards kind of anti-establishment narratives, because the establishment here is so shit, and so put through this in these kind of terms that are just really quite weird. I mean, I had to fill a form in the other day, and it asked what my nationality was, and it was like, give me, in Northern Ireland they kind of try to get around, like, they go British, Irish, Northern Irish, you know, other, and then, like, I was like, because you can't, because they basically have invented Northern Irishness as a way for people who don't want to say that they're Irish or British, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that I'm Northern Irish either, because I think that's a middle class kind of construct. It's so bullshit. It's so alliance. But anyway.
By the way, this is something I love about Northern Ireland. One of many things is Northern Ireland is an object lesson in contradiction.
Yeah.
British and Irish, part of the European Union, not part of the European Union. Even it's a city that is called Derry and Londonderry at the same time that you can't say, simultaneously. Stroke City.
Derry, Londonderry.
Yeah. This is Northern Ireland, and the peace process was an experiment in apocalyptic politics, not progressive politics. Progressive politics, the progressives, they know where they're going and they're moving towards that. And if you don't agree, then you're not progressive. Apocalyptic politics is, we don't know where we're going.
Yeah.
We'll just sit in the room and have the conflict, and something will happen. And I think the peace process in Northern Ireland was an apocalyptic event, because we just were like, we have to sit in the same room and we don't know what's going to happen. And it was profound.
And let's be, it's one of the most ridiculous things in the world that happened.
Yeah.
Like whenever I was growing up, I just never thought it was ever going to end.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't think that it's.
And it's called the Good Friday Agreement. Like, there's a lot of significance to that. Good Friday is the coagulation of contradiction. God, human, highest, lowest, something that can't die, dying. That was what this was.
Yeah. I ended up writing on that. I literally ended up writing on a forum, nationalities are for dicks. Like, I ticked other, and then what do you mean by that? And I went national. So because I feel like I think the last time I felt proud of, in any way, part of national pride was the opening ceremony of the 2012 Olympics. And it was a really brilliant piece of art that made me kind of go, oh yeah, like the UK's all right actually. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of happy enough to have been part of that. And people really push me on this sometimes. Go, well, what are you? You can't be nothing. And I kind of go like, well, I am my experience in a sense. So like, I am a Belfastian, I think, first and foremost, more than I am than Irish or British or anything. I do not associate with the concept of Irishness or Britishness. I don't have anything in common with, well, no, I don't have anything in common. I don't have enough in common with people from Bradford to call myself British, and I equally don't have enough in common.
That would be English.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't feel that. I don't feel that sort of community, communion, or whatever. Yeah. I don't feel that. Whereas, like, I absolutely feel fiercely proud of Belfast, fiercely Belfastian, a Belfastard. I definitely feel that this is a really key part of my identity, And
by the way, because nobody wants us. One of the definition that Paul gives of Christianity is the trash of the world, and I love this. It's the first critique of purity culture, where you identify as trash, as the outside, as the dirt. And there's something about Northern Ireland where nobody wants us, and I think that's beautiful. Yeah, like, we identify, and that's a very existentialist theme.
And when you visit, you'll see that. So there's an insecurity almost about, like, come on, we want to be liked, but equally, like, we don't give a fuck if you like us. Do you know what I mean? There's this real kind of tension between, well, we're just going to be there, but are people standing up and nodding at me because we're over time? So.
We're just giving you a 5 minutes.
Oh no, that's good. I was Phil, by the way, like, I think you and I are very much share some of these ideas, and you could term yourself maybe a Protestant atheist, or in many ways. I mean, is there
like that? Yeah. Well, I have returned to the idea of Protestantism in a way that I didn't think I would. That was the one phrase I would run away from. That was my working class North Belfast heritage. But as I've got older, I've returned to it from a similar direction to you in terms of Protestantism in a Kierkegaardian sense is the rejection of authority, including the authority of God.
Yes.
My question, I suppose, or the difficulty here when Adam's rejecting nationhood as an idea, or what kind of political project can you make when you're trying to encourage people to commit to the impossibility of politics making them satisfied? Like, the difficulty for me is that, and I find this in my own life as I've moved into the direction, and in a very personal way that you've described, and the journey you've gone on, I find myself considering myself working out how to do this on my own, but the idea of making a communal politics that actually takes control of a country, for example, and institutes a new kind of politics, a new way of working out social relations, a new relation to capital, for example. This seems very, very difficult whenever what your project is encouraging people not to believe that they can be satisfied by the things that, as like Freud's project was initially, that if people can deal with this thing, then they can overcome and become these kind of more enlightened people. By the end of his life, he thought that's not going to happen, and Nazism happened. So our attraction as human beings to authority and to give our authority over to something, we're going to we might kill one god, but then another one will come along, and it doesn't seem possible. So I might be able to do it for myself, but what if there's no community and all we have is communion, and we can find a few people to get together with? That seems good, but it doesn't seem likely to change a country.
And because on the first night I was talking about, if the 19th century is the historical death of God, then the 20th century is the denial of the death of God, Nietzsche and existentialism. Then the 21st century, has to be the development of a technology that helps us affirm the death of God. And I think that's what psychoanalysis begins for the individual. Yes, we need a communal technology to encounter that. Whether or not it's possible, you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you, but you got to work as if it is. And I wonder whether it is possible to have communions, have large communions instead of communities. Otherwise, that's the reason why there's no intelligent life in the universe, because one of the walls we never get past is when self-consciousness gets to this level, it creates these binaries and destroys itself. And so, it's getting past this level of development is potentially impossible or next to impossible.
But still worth doing.
But still worth trying.
But also, like, for me, I think one of the things that very recently I've sort of come to terms with is I'll just do what I can, right? And that's it. Like, only a dickhead thinks they're going to change. Do you know what I mean? Come on. You don't think you're going to change the world, do you?
No, but...
You don't.
No.
You feel like you can play a role.
Yes.
You can be part of a movement. You can be... you can be part of the Chinese water torture of change.
Yes.
Right? You can be part of the...
Beautiful metaphor.
It's maybe not a great metaphor. That's why I'm not... But you know what I mean? You can be one of the drips.
Yes.
But that's all you can be.
No,
this is a fucking big universe, right?
It is, yeah.
And if you can be or stalagmite or whatever, you want to talk about... This is incremental. Yes. And I genuinely feel that for me... I feel achievement. I feel a sense of achievement about what I've done. I know I've had an impact on people's lives, and I've done projects that have really profoundly changed people's lives, and that's amazing. Yeah. And that's more than what most people... I mean, you probably feel the same, but it's still a fucking drop in the ocean in comparison to what needs to happen. Yes. I can just do my bit, and that's it. And I'm down with that. And we're going to be probably living with capitalism for a long time, for a while longer. I'd love to see it, end. I can just do my bit to try and bring it to an end,
But I remember, Phil, us having a conversation about this once, if you remember this, and I feel like I convinced you, one of the rare times where you agreed, but one of the things you were saying to me is, why do I, for example, use this Christian language and work with the Christian institution? And my response was, yeah, well, if you do these in small groups, you don't do much, but what if we can create something that we can inject into that host, and that it's not foreign to that host? Just as you give blood to someone, it can't be foreign blood, it has to be blood that's not foreign, but we inject into that host, which is Christianity, these ideas, and they take. Then you can have literally at first tens, then hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of communities that the infrastructure already exists, they're already there, so all that has to change is what's going on within them, and you can impact hundreds of thousands of people. So people who are watching this, right, if you set up a community, say 300 of you set up communities, 200 of them are going to fail, it's going to be a disaster, you might lose all of your money, your relationships might break up, you might lose all your friends, you might die of a heart attack and stress, but 100 of you, it'll be okay. And it'll still be shit, and you'll probably still lose some of your friendships, you'll probably still lose your money, and you'll still probably die early. But then about 10 or 15 of you will do something that really works. I know you don't like those statistics.
I hate those.
But still, that's good, because if it doesn't put you off, then do it.
You think
those are good statistics?
But I'd go further than that. I would say that the 300 you start, that there's no better way to waste your life. Like we've there's
Okay,
we've talked about this. Like, no one gets what they want, as we've talked about this. No one gets what they want, but there's different ways of not getting what you want, right?
Best line. He didn't even put that in his book. That was a line in his novel. You didn't too.
On that we can agree. Like there is definitely no better way to waste your life.
And that refusal to give your authority over, and that's why I think you were even more right, believe it or not, than I realized at the time, was that whenever you collapse into secular language, and this is where I think you went wrong, and I went wrong with you, is that authority gets smuggled in secular language. Look at what's happened with COVID. That everyone's claiming authority in the name of science, but science just has this abstraction. At least when you can name your God, you can argue with that God, you can fight it, you can disagree, you can reject. All sorts of things are possible. When authority gets smuggled in somewhere else, it's much more difficult. So actually the language that you're describing is maybe useful because you can argue against it, you can fight against it.
Yes.
Well,
and it even invites you to fight against it.
I think you underestimate where I can find authority, motherfucker.
I know.
Like I can find rebellion.
I'm getting now before Adam gets Larry.
All right, come on.
Oh God, we can't hold on camera. Jesus. Sorry, he's a test.
These are wild. These are
Wild. Okay, what's next?
We were a few times trying to thinking this is a good time to end it, and then you kept lighting up again.
Oh, yeah.
Give it up for Adam, the drip Turkington.
Clear off.
Give it up for Statler, the Muppet.
So here, it was really great listening to Pete talk about death. I actually really enjoyed your talk there. And a song popped into my mind, and it's about the trauma of death, right enough. And it goes like this. Well, I don't like deleting dead people's numbers from my phone. Ooh, don't like deleting dead people's numbers from my phone. I used to call you when I was alone. No, I don't like deleting dead people's numbers from my phone. Death is such a diner, rarely goes well. And you never really loved me, but no one on the outside could tell. And death, it is true, was the end of you and me. Now all I got for company's the shadow of your memory. Don't like deleting dead people's numbers from my phone. There you go. And this one is about how shit it is to be a background music harpist and sit in the corner playing music for people who aren't listening. How many strings has your harp, and when did you start to play? I will answer these two questions 42 times a day. And as I'm wafting lightly through a treasury of Celtic delights, I will often get the question at some point in the night, do you play AC/DC or Motorhead or Nine Inch Nails? And I will smile politely, but inside I boil with rage. I'm your fucking harpist, and no, it does not rock. Plugged it into distortion slips, give it electric shocks. I trilled it round and bands from New York to the city. And when the harp tries to rock, it winds up sounding when the universe got started, it was time for rock and roll. God created hairy men. with electric guitars and soul. When it was time for a harpist, he was on his funny half hour. He wasn't expecting them to go play rock and roll in bars. So I'm your fucking harpist, and no, it does not rock. I plugged it into distortions, lips giving electric shocks. I trilled it round in bands from New York to this city. And when the harp tries to rock, it winds up sounding pretty. Will I give you an example? Everybody at home say yes. He's got mud on his face, a big disgrace, kicking his can all over the place. We will rock you, harpists of great diction. We will rock you. Do you see what I mean? I'm your fucking harpist, and no, it does not rock. I plugged it in distortion slips, giving electric shocks. I trilled it round in bands from New York to this city. And when the harp tries to rock, it winds up sounding pretty. The only way that it transpires, piss on it and set it on fire, and fuck it from the hotel to the nearest church fire. Cause I'm your fucking harpist. You get the picture now, don't you? Well, let's just stop this one. I'm just so bored with that, I'm not even gonna continue. So I was gonna tell you this little story, and I'll try and sing it. This is about... Something's wrong, hold on. This is about learning reflexology on Zoom when I had no gigs. So absolutely a year of no gigs, and I did a diploma. Okay, and this is exactly what it was like, and it's all true. I used to be a musician, a harpist to be exact. I'd play it all around the globe, carry it on my back. 2020 vision, Corona swept the globe. With music rendered non-essential, the government sent us home. I had a few nervous breakdowns, drank too many bottles of wine, and wept for my loss of income, and ranted a lot online. The venues were closed for ages, would open no time soon. So I enrolled in a course on Udemy and started classes on Zoom. The teacher was quite lovely. She bought a plastic foot, showed us where to apply the pressure, and recommended certain books. I was studying anatomy with the wrong side of my brain, colouring in pictures of penises when the government suggested I retrain. I hit the high dough of fury. I'm a harpist, harping's what I do. But I started this course on Udemy, so I might as well push through. It was time to get some experience with reflexology. So I teamed up with a woman in West Belfast who was on the same course as me. She'd found herself a client, she found him in the spar, and if we took a foot each, it would only take half an hour. Here, love, I've a desperate pain in my legs. Do you think it's 'cause I back massage I got in Kelly bags? A back massage causing that much pain? I'm not sure I agree. Oh well, love, it must just be the bullets in my knees. You got bullets in your knees? I'm waiting on a scan, but your hair pains, wee buns, when you're a West Belfast man. And how long have you been waiting? Since 1981. And with a sad coronavirus, I can't even get my normal outlets of fun. Well, the moral of the story is you can't learn everything on Zoom. If you press too hard on Belfast knees, bullets ricochet round the room. We all know reflexology was invented in the past, and I'm pretty sure the creator had never been to West Belfast.
much going on in the comments box. It's actually hard to keep track of it now. I'm losing, but we have loads of questions. But importantly, Peter Rollins, let's give the people what they want. We want. This is the quick fire yes no
yes
round.
or no. Okay, right.
So I'm going to ask you to get in behind the bar. Mm-hmm. Johnny is going to be here with the bell, with the countdown. We don't know how this is going to work. We hope it works.
It's experimental.
Yeah.
So I just have to say yes or no.
It's strictly.
I'm the
very importantly,
undivided
it's
leader
strictly
here.
yes or no.
No, maybe.
questions.
Yes, no, maybe.
No, it's yes or it's no, Peter.
And if you
That's
don't
the
get
end
to
of it.
20 points, there's a forfeit, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not maybe, yes.
Yes.
Is there a prize then if I get to 20?
There's a big prize.
Nice.
Okay, are you ready? We've gathered questions. The bell's ringing. Am I ready? Am I ready?
Time hasn't started. You've already got 1
Are you
point.
ready, Johnny? We're ready. And your time starts. This is so exciting.
No.
Okay. If God, telling God that God doesn't exist, is it therefore that Jesus is a philosopher and there is no incarnation?
No.
Did God alphabeticize Adam's primary agony by instructing him to name the animals in the garden?
No.
No. In the contradiction that is life, are we to be moving from the nothing to the symbol and language rather than from the symbol to nothing?
Say it again.
In the contradiction that is life, are we to be moving from the nothing to the symbol and language rather than from the symbol to nothing?
No.
Must we work
3
toward
points.
Must we work toward a freer world despite people's resistance to being free?
Yes.
4
Is
points.
Paul the man?
Yes.
Has God forsaken you?
Yes.
What do you think of Adam's beard?
No. Yes.
We've still got time. Is it better to live?
Time out.
Oh
Oh, how many did I get? I didn't get that many. Oh dear. No.
no! Do you want another minute?
7.
This question to be read again.
Yeah. You didn't make 20.
Well,
7.
give us another 30 seconds
Okay,
or
okay,
something.
Well, we give him
Another
minute.
minute. Another minute.
Another minute?
Another
Okay.
minute.
Ursula says another minute,
It's good
and
fun.
I would listen to Ursula if I was us.
Okay, hold on.
Are we ready?
Go.
Go. Is it better to live without the promise of binary answers rather than the truth that the options beyond are infinite?
I have to hear it again.
Is it better to live? I mean, it's hard. This is hard. Is it better to live without the promise of binary answers rather than the truth that the options beyond are infinite?
No.
By the death of God, are we specifically talking about the closed future deterministic theistic God and deterministic Newtonian mechanics?
Yes.
Is an imperfect contradictory utopia the only thing that makes sense?
Yes.
Is oneness a death?
Yes.
Is Hegel the best philosopher?
Yes.
Is Adam the most annoying person you know?
Yes.
Fuck you.
Is Santa, in the song Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the God in which evangelicals believe?
Yes.
Is anxiety the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen?
Yes.
Is resurrection another name for life after the death of God?
Yes.
Yeah.
16 points.
6. Oh, no.
Those are all genuine questions from our
Do you know,
the
I
chance.
just realised we didn't think this out. We said he needs to hit a target of 20, but we've only got 16 questions there.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
Yeah,
There's
you've
a
got
meaning
forward.
in that somewhere.
Are there any of those questions that you would like to revisit?
Yeah, no, they're all very good questions,
They are,
actually. They're very good. There was one that
I can read them out again.
Oh, good. What was the one about the, is it better to live without binary oppositions?
Oh, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, because I kind of could interpret that a few ways, so say it again.
Okay, I'll say it again. Is it better? And someone wrote this, I can't remember her name, and I tweaked it a bit to make it a question. I don't know if she said it as a question. I took a bit of license here. But
Okay.
I'm gonna, let's read it out. Is it better to live without the promise of binary answers rather than the truth that the options beyond are infinite? You said no.
Yes, yeah, no is right.
Yes,
yeah,
no.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yes, no.
Are you happy with that answer?
I'm happy with that answer. Yeah, I don't
Do you
have
want to
explain
discuss it further? It is a good one.
Well, no, so, yeah, no, it's better to experience the infinite than fall into binary thinking.
Yeah, I'm with, you know what? I could have answered that.
Yeah, there you go.
Couldn't I? I would agree to that. Okay, let's see if the notebook works. So, shout out to Joe Shaw, who's currently having his Death of God experience. I want to send some love
Oh, wow.
to him.
Okay,
As they
alright.
would say in Dublin, he is going through the horrors right now.
Oh, no.
He has loads of questions about pyrotheology, and he because he's just starting. He says, so how does pyrotheology conceptualize God, the divine, the eternal?
Yes. So in a nutshell, I'll keep coming back to this idea that God, first and foremost, we're talking about a concept. So there's the question of whether God exists in reality, and that's a different question. But definitely where philosophers start is with the concept of God and working from there. So even if, imagine like crazy things happen to you, some synchronicity happens to you and you go, oh wow, I think that was God or something like that. Depending on where you were brought up, what country, when, you're going to conceptualize what that God is like, or you might think it's the universe, you might whatever.
Do you want to know what my grandma says about that?
But yes, your grandma's great. She's got a lot of wisdom.
Refers to it as God incidences.
God incidences.
There's no
That's
such thing
lovely.
as a coincidence. It's a God incidence.
Ah,
yes.
very nice. But in order to say that, in order to say that, you have to have a concept of God. So the concept is, even if something weird happens to you, you have to have a concept that you apply to it. So it sounds weird to say, but philosophers always start with ideas. You start with the idea of God. You have an idea of God. You have a concept of God. Now, maybe it adheres to reality. Maybe it doesn't. The concept. And my argument is, not my argument, Hegel's argument.
Good old Hegel.
Good old Hegel is that
The best philosopher.
The
best philosopher, right? And the most difficult. But is that as you work through the concept, as you go deeper in, it collapses into something even more contradictory and interesting. It keeps collapsing, it keeps becoming more contradictory until it becomes the ultimate contradiction. And then it gets so heavy it breaks into reality, and our thought touches matter. And we get an insight into the very nature of reality itself.
There you go,
That's
Joe
beautiful.
Shaw.
That's, and that's better than watching Netflix.
I don't know, is it?
Yeah, maybe not, I don't know. But I don't know if I answered that, but anyway, keep going.
Well, you're getting there. I mean, you couldn't answer it quickly. We don't have enough time for that. But we'll move on.
Let's just keep going for another 3 hours, guys. Tomorrow night, another 3 hours. Everyone's happy. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's going to be open.
Celeste says, so are decentering practices the way to address / take the trauma out of our primal agony?
Yes. So transformance art is probably the way I would say primarily to do that. Because transformance art basically takes music and art and comedy and theatre and all of these elements to kind of alphabeticize the trauma, to put it into language, to help us subjectivize it. Because here's the difference between us and dogs and cans of beer and all of that, is this can of beer is susceptible to what's called dialectics, and it will collapse and it will fall apart over time. And so it is a victim of contradiction. It is a victim of entropy. We are also victims of entropy. We will grow old, we will die. But we have one advantage over the beer can, is that we can subjectivize the contradiction. We can understand it. We can flow with it in a internal way. And why am I saying that? Oh, yes. So transformance art kind of helps us do that. Decentering practices are primarily designed to confront us, to show us that we are interconnected with the other. So what we tend to do, in World War II, for example, we look at someone like Hitler and think Hitler's terrible, Hitler's not like us. But we in Europe created the economic conditions for the rise of neoliberalism, creates fascism that then has to fight it. And so a lot of decentering practices, it's designed to see how we're all interconnected. So it breaks the pure impure and sees that the monsters that I'm fighting are the monsters that are within me. So that's what decentering practices do. They attempt to show how the thing that we think is outside and external to us, we are interconnected with. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually make sense. Matthew says, is it ever possible to fully detach from I have never seen this word before, libidinal, Libidinal. Well, libidinal.
Yeah, just energy, your desire.
Like libido. You mentioned it earlier.
Yes, your libido.
I did hear you say it. Okay, right. So is it ever possible to fully detach from the libidinal investment? He says, I regularly notice myself falling back into this in the search for wholeness.
Yeah.
Heather wonders the same. Courtney wonders the same as well.
Yes. And no, it would be horrible if you could, right? If you could, you would just be a zombie. You would just be sitting around doing nothing. The big key is that we realize that where our libido, where our desire gets its energy is in precisely not getting what we want. It's in precisely positioning ourselves in a type of orbit around what we want. So there's two disasters in life you've heard me talk about. One is getting what you want, and the other is not getting what you want. So you don't get what you want, you're unhappy. You get what you want, you're unhappy.
Yeah.
So there's a certain, it's not about getting rid of your libidinal desire. It's about realizing that what generates it and what sustains it is a type of struggle, sacrifice, life of gift giving. That's central to life. And that's what paratheology is. It says, I'm detaching from thinking that this is the object that's going to make me happy. But I'm not detaching from going, things, like I use the example of paratheology is good. Every time I try to define what I'm doing, I feel I don't do it. And I go away from this and I go, I have to do another week because I didn't define it well enough, right? So it's always a failure, right? But the failure generates stuff. It generates videos, it generates content, it generates knowledge.
Some gobshite in the background letting his mobile play.
I was
a problem with his phone.
But I enjoy the failure. I enjoy never being able to describe what it is. Or if you're writing a book, a lot of people, when you write a book, you go like, I want to say everything I want to say. And then you read the book and go, I didn't do it. I failed. The failure generated books. And the idea is that you start to desire that failure. Anybody who writes a book and is like, oh, I'm going to be so happy when I see it printed. And if I get fame or if I make money, you're always disappointed because that's the shit bit. The fun bit is the writing the book. The fun bit is the throw, like Phil was saying earlier, is throwing yourself into the work. Whenever I say to you guys, build these communities, and Phil was completely right in saying this, go like, and I say you might lose all your money and you might lose your relationships and you might die early from a heart attack, right? Go like, yeah, but you'll have a blast because the work, the enjoyment is in the work itself, not in being successful at the end of the day, you know? So anyway.
Grandma says it's the journey, not the destination.
There you go.
But also the thing with failure, I find it very interesting as well because we don't, we're not encouraged to fail a whole lot. You know, we're sent to school and you want to do well and you want to do well and you don't want to do well. Failure is not really talked about or appreciated or valued.
Yes.
But it is immensely valuable.
It's immensely valuable, and we don't realize it's actually the failures
super valuable.
So even if someone became rich thinking, I want to provide for my kids, I want to make loads of money so that my kids don't need for anything, you will often find that it's the parents who were poor and worked hard and made the money who had much more enjoyment, and the kids who maybe say they got rich and the kids can have everything they want, they're the ones that are unhappy. So there's something weirdly about struggle. Now, I don't want to like romanticize struggle. The whole issue is in our society, lots of people sacrifice, but they don't see the good of the sacrifice. The good of the sacrifice is taken by a small minority. So people have to sacrifice so much and they don't see that sacrifice benefiting their community, the people they love. What we want to see is not getting rid of sacrifice, but how we can have a society where we do sacrifice
and we appreciate
and we all benefit from it.
Yes,
exactly.
I was actually going to ask Adam, is there more questions popping up in the comments box? I have one more in my notes here, but we have touched on it already.
Question. Sorry, this one literally just popped up, so it might be shit, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As you mentioned earlier, Paul being the first to point to the death of God, how does Galatians 2:20 point to this? I have been crucified with Christ.
Yes.
That's the question.
How does it, because that's a beautiful, exactly, I think.
How does it point to the crucifixion, I guess?
Oh yeah, I'd be crucified with Christ. Yeah. But if I get the question right, this is exactly what I mean. This is crazy stuff. Like Paul, we don't, this is why actually the return to Paul in philosophies, and so Paul obviously is a religious figure, they all study him in theology, but there's been a return to Paul by philosophers who have no interest in religion, no interest in God, but they find in Paul this radical idea. So when he says, I preach Christ crucified, and then he says, I've been crucified with Christ, he is saying something like there's something salvatory, something that we need to participate in this death. So that verse that you're mentioning is exactly what I'm talking about. And what will I say about that? One final thing. Paul says this is foolishness to the Greeks and a stumbling block to the Jews. This is interesting. So the Greeks are all about philosophy, wisdom. So it's foolishness to wisdom. God can't die. Either God exists and can't die, or God doesn't exist and can't die, right? So it's foolishness to philosophy until Hegel comes along. And it's a stumbling block to the Jews because the Jews look for signs and signs of emancipation, signs of the power of God, God liberating the Jews from Egypt, separating the waters, freeing the slaves. So the idea that God, instead of liberating, dies on a cross, that's foolishness to anybody who's looking for a sign. That's ridiculous. So Paul's going this is really weird. This is absolute foolishness because the idea is God saves people and is powerful and will redeem people. But this God dies. And it's foolishness because philosophically that makes no sense. And then Paul goes, and there's something really interesting there. And it takes thousands of years before we can even, and we're not even touching the surface of what it means.
Takes thousands of years before Peter Rollins comes along.
I'm finally here
And we
tonight
start getting
in
some
Belfast in 2021.
Welcome back to the stage.
I broke you there. You were building the climax,
Yeah.
and I fucked you. Sorry.
That was very appropriate.
I mean,
Adam?
I do think there was one final question that came in that
Okay.
I think is a yes/no question, which I think
Can I just point out that game is over and he won?
I did. But you can
Well,
do
go
one
on,
more.
Adam, we'll give it to you.
no, by the
We'll give it to
rules that you said, because he didn't even have enough questions.
Our rules are rubbish. Our rules are
How
rubbish.
can you? Anyway, so
Yeah.
the question is it possible to be truly happy?
Happy? No.
Yes or no, loser? That's a.
I'm going to say yes, and then I'm
No,
going
you,
to...
no,
Yes.
no, yes. I think that's. I don't want a qualification for that. I want to know that I can be happy.
Yes, but it's a category of fools. You don't want to be happy. Yes,
you
you can
said
be
that-
happy, and it's a nightmare. Don't be happy. Be meaningful. But yes, you can be happy. But happiness is the category of idiots.
But then,
Oh my god.
but what about it?
Sorry, that's next year. We'll pick that up.
Okay, that's where we'll pick up
Yeah,
next
it is
year.
next year.
Okay.
You know what? I'm not even gonna join in there.
Okay, well, thank you.
Let's take this time to thank everyone.
Please.
Let's thank all our musicians.
Oh, yes.
Throughout the weekend, we had the Ada Storm and the JVR project. We had Duke Special. We had the world's most dangerous harvest, Ursula Burns. To our speakers, Barry Taylor's here behind us. To Gladys Scaniel, to Pádraig Ó Tuama, who came to us virtually. To the production team, Johnny McEwen and Adam Turkington. To the Muppets, Statler and Waldorf. To the brilliant tech team who did a brilliant job, Alan Meeben and Adam Bell, ably assisted by Ron. And to the one person who made this all possible, me.
Yes.